Alabama's 11th practice is completed. And is it scaring anybody that we only have one scholarship back that's doing anything right now?
You are Locked On Bama, your daily podcast on the Alabama Crimson Tide. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back into Locked On Bama, AHSA's radio network. Luke Robinson, that's me, and Bama Online's Jimmy Stein, that's him. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. I'll tell you about FanDuel in just a bit. Thank you, everydayers, and thank you, newbies. Y'all are both the best. Hard to believe, but it's a tie. And, Locked On is your team every day, just like Locked On Bama is your team every day. And, Jimmy, speaking of things that need to be locked up, it may be my medicine cabinet if some of our running backs don't get healed up pretty doggone quickly. I'm not really to that point, but Justice Haynes was the only scholarship back really doing any practice work today.
Yeah, it's a little frightening, and I think it's on the heels of, if you want to get super paranoid, I mean, it's on the heels of the big news over the weekend, Texas losing C.J. Baxter, their outstanding running back, lost for the season. Very next day, Texas A&M. The funny thing is Texas A&M fans understood, they got a full lesson in karma. As you can understand, A&M fans, when they heard that C.J. Baxter news, they're probably like, our rival lost their back, and then they lose Reuben Owens, their starting running back, the next day for the season. That has not happened at Alabama. The good news is we're usually, I say we're, the Alabama media, we're usually sort of given a heads up or told a little bit. I mean, when people are injured and it's serious, we sort of get a bit of a heads up usually. I don't believe any of these running back injuries are what I would call serious. To me, serious means you would miss games. I believe that if Alabama was playing a real game this upcoming weekend and not just another scrimmage, I have no reason to believe that all of the backs wouldn't be available. I think if any of them are more seriously injured, it might be Daniel Hill. We did see Daniel Hill, the true freshman from Meridian. We saw him at the open practice on Sunday, not wearing a jersey. In fact, he was wearing just an Alabama t-shirt with his arm in a sling. The other backs looked like they could have practiced. Richard Young, in fact, did practice early in the open practice and then sat out most of it, whereas Jan Miller and Kevin Riley didn't practice at all on Sunday, though we heard that Jan Miller had a nice game on Saturday in the scrimmage. So I don't think any of it's serious. The problem, as Luke alluded to, is just simply all of it happened at one spot. And now at that spot, you have Justice Haynes and the walk-ons that are out there getting the reps today in their 11th practice. It was a full pad practice, by the way. We were out there for a very short period of time. I have no idea why or who makes up these rules, but we only had 3 practice periods today. That's really between 12 and 15 minutes. That is all we got. So we had to see what we saw as quickly as possible. And thankfully, Charlie, my colleague with BOL, Charlie Potter, got in position to see the backs really well. I didn't. I watched the defensive line and offensive line because it was the closest thing to the door, and I didn't want to go very far, so knew I wouldn't have so I watched the offensive line, the defensive line. Some of the offensive linemen were missing in the Sunday practice. They were back. Tyler Booker and Jaden Roberts were back, and they weren't with the ones. So the first team offensive line was what we've seen almost all fall. Caden Proctor and Wilcom Formby at the tackles, Jaden Roberts and Tyler Booker at the guards, and Parker Brailsford at center. The change was with the twos because one offensive lineman was still out, and that's Olas. Olas was out. He didn't practice fan day. He wasn't out there practicing with the offensive lineman. He was off to the side. I think he was on the stationary bike. So with Olas out of the two lineup was interesting, Luke, because the second center today was true freshman Joseph Ionata. He was the number 2 center. The guards on either side of him were Gino Vandermark and Rock Montgomery. We have seen both of those guys at number 2 center at various points, but they were the number 2 guards today. And of course, the number 2 tackles are Elijah Pritchett on the right side, Miles McVay on the left side. But that was your offensive line. I watched that group real close, and I also watched the defensive line up close, which continues to be one of the best, most impressive deep groups on the team. They were working in an unusual drill I hadn't seen before, where they were working on tackling in short yardage situations where you take on the back and you're trying to push back and push a pile back and proper technique for, hey, we don't need this dude gaining any forward movement here because it's 4th and 1 or 3rd and 1 or whatever. But they were working on tackling, and boy, it got kind of physical. I couldn't believe, man. I'm like, man, they scrimmaged Saturday, full pads yesterday, full pads today, and they're doing this because it was pretty physical out there. Trust me, this was not a situation, Luke, where anybody from the media wanted to get in there and get a rep. No. This was a big boy football. When they hand James Smith a football and he's trying to make a yard, and all that's stopping him between him and the goal line is Damon Payne, and they have a collision, it's like, wowza.
Yeah.
Don't get caught up in that traffic. It was some physical stuff, real football. And boy, that defensive line group, it is good. I'm joking, but it was good. And you can see when you watch those drills, by the way, Luke, the thing that interests me is when Jamarian Latham does it, when Tim Keenan does it, when Tim Smith does it, Freddie Roach watches and claps and says, hey, good job. When Asaya Fanga or Jeremiah Beeman does it, it's like, hold up. He's got to teach them. It's the younger guys are still being taught technique. The older guys have done it so often. The coach is like, that's it. That's how you do it. That's how you do it. Younger guys do it. It's like, oh, hold up. That's all wrong. And but hey, that's exactly what coaching is, right?
Yeah, and there'll be some listeners that will be surprised. No Freddie Roach coaches, which I'm a Freddie Roach fan. I really am. But I mean, he probably gets killed as much as any coach on the current staff without
it's so silly.
Good reason or logic, if you ask me. But a couple of things you threw out there, Jamarian Latham, I'm still getting used to his being number 20. That's going to take me a minute. The other thing, going back to, I'm not panicking about the running backs being banged up. I'm really not. But, given the fact that Texas and Texas A&M both had running backs, Texas' second string running back also got banged up, and Jahmyr Gibbs hurt a hamstring. I mean, you see all these things on Twitter about running backs getting hurt, and then you hear about, Alabama only had one scholarship back really doing anything today. It kind of, does shake you up a bit. And then also I go back to 2021. Let's not forget, in 2021, we ended the season with Brian Robinson, and that was it. Everybody talks about Jameson Williams and
had to move guys. Had to move a linebacker and a receiver to running back.
Yeah, everybody talks about Mechie and Jameson Williams getting hurt. What if we had just had Jason McClellan on that team? Are we able to win the national championship? Maybe so. But regardless, I know that you took a look at some of the defensive linemen, and like you said, they're doing very well. I think that's in a position group you and I think will be very, very sneaky good.
It's deep.
Yeah,
I mean, it's deep. It's not deep with. I know people are going to be frustrated because there's not a Marcel Darius out there. There's not a Jonathan Allen, and that's what people want. And Q Williams. I get that's what people want, and there's not that. But what there is just multiple waves of good players. I mean, Keenan's going to play. James Smith is going to play. Tim Smith is going to play. Jaheim Otis was with the ones on fan day, and he looked good today, and he met with the media, in fact, after practice today. Damon Payne's going to play. And then there's a young guy like Edric Hill. I would keep your eye on Edric Hill as a young guy who might get in with the first team. And then there's the Bandits. There's 4 guys that play Bandit. They all look good. Latham is the sort of starter. LT Overton, one of the stars of this fall camp, is currently the second Bandit, but he's going to play a ton. And behind him is Jordan Renaud and Keon Keeley, who look like $1 million in their uniform. I mean, and then you watch them in drills, and they're incredibly athletic for their size. This defensive line group, by the way, recruited by Freddie Roach, this terrible coach, who's got to be one of the best recruiters in all of college football, by the way, in reality. And then, by the way, Alabama's had one defensive lineman drafted for like 5 years in a row. And I don't think you can find another program that can say that. If you can count them on one hand. So Freddie's bringing in talent to make Alabama one of the deepest, best defensive line groups in the country. And then he's kicking out at least one NFL player every year. And not everybody else does that. So all that criticism to me is just, frankly, it's silly, because if you're recruiting and then developing them into NFL talent and winning all the games, I mean, what Alabama just in the past 3 years is 34-6. I mean, things are going pretty well.
And Alabama's still recruiting very well. And speaking of recruiting, some new rankings were out on the rival side, and some Alabama guys made some jumps. But got to tell you about FanDuel, because FanDuel's the best. I don't have to tell you about it. I'm just going to tell you about it. And later on in the podcast, we're going to tell you about some Heisman odds on FanDuel. And I love sports. You love sports. We all love sports. But, everything's sort of simmered down right now. It's about to heat back up, though. So you want to get involved with FanDuel right now. FanDuel keeps the sports going all the time, whenever I want it, whenever you want it. All I have to do is open the app, and they're the bets that I want to dream up anytime, and I can take care of it on FanDuel. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everybody every day, all summer long, whatever's left of it, and then in the fall. So head on over to FanDuel.com and start making the most of what's left of your summer. FanDuel is an official sportsbook partner of Major League Baseball, as you know. I want to remind you to make your second lesson Locked On College Football. Spencer McLaughlin does an amazing job. Single host over there, just kicking chicken at all times. You want to go check him out. He's got college football covered soup to nuts. I never understood that whole saying, but that's what he does. He does a great job.
That means. I don't know. It sounds terrible.
It does. I mean, I always wondered, was it regular soup and nuts, like nuts and bolts, or like nuts, or do they feel like this food chain is from soup to nut? It doesn't matter.
I don't want nuts and bolts in my soup for sure.
We need to talk a little bit about Rivals. Came out with their new 250, their top 250. And, we talked about it yesterday. Keelan Russell has been bumped way up. He is now the number 9 player in the country. He moved up a whopping 38 spots. Now, there was some talk he could be moved up to number 1. That plum goes to Tavian St. Clair, who's committed to Ohio State. How about this? I mean, I was just thinking about some of the quarterbacks in this class. You got Tavian St. Clair at 1, Bryce Underwood committed to LSU at 2, Juju Lewis, who they still have remarkably high. They've got him at number 4. He's committed to USC. A lot of people think he may flip to Indiana, which is bananas. But Keelan Russell at 9. And, there's just a lot of good quarterbacks.
It's a good year for quarterbacks. It's a good year for quarterbacks. And I know it's a sacrilege on Alabama show. I mean, I would have Bryce Underwood 1. I would have Keelan Russell 2. He'd certainly be, as far as I'm concerned, in the running for number 2. I would have Bryce Underwood 1 just based on his physical skill set. And he wasn't at the Elite 11 where Keelan won the award from the Elite 11 people. Interesting rankings because, hey, it's Rivals. We don't at On3. We hold the 24/7 rankings in high regard, and Rivals and ESPN a little lower. But Rivals does have some people. It's interesting, and it affects the On3 industry ranking. And Alabama's On3 industry ranking rose today due to the release of those Rivals rankings. So per the On3 industry, the Rivals re-ranking was favorable to Alabama across the board. So Alabama went up. I had a numbers geek tell me just earlier today that due to that Rivals re-ranking, if A.K. Deere commits to Alabama, which is what we expect at BOL,
at some point,
then Alabama would be number 1. Yeah, if you add A.K. Deere to Alabama, Alabama would be number 1 ahead of Ohio State again, per the numbers geeks over there. So that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. And something else that's interesting. So Keelan Russell, of course, committed to Alabama. There's nobody else that's a 5-star that is committed to the Tide. But the next 3 players that just missed the 5-star status, that's Ty Haywood, Caleb Cunningham, and Dijon Lee, and then Michael Carroll, who moved up 155 spots to number 30. Those 4 guys are right on the cusp of 5-star status. And I think by the time the year is complete, they will all probably be in there. And it's kind of funny. Ty Haywood moved down 4 spots, as did Caleb Cunningham. And I'm thinking, boy, if anything else, I think most everybody else is moving those guys up.
Right.
But,
shout out to On3 for being ahead of the curve on Michael Carroll. On3 had Michael Carroll rank around 30, while other services didn't even have him ranked or had him in the 200s. But as you see that big Rivals jump, others are just catching up to what On3 has said for a long time. Another guy that On3 ranks high that none of the other services do yet is Latsier Brooks. I think on three's right on him too. I know Alabama fans think so, but I had a celebrity sighting today. Do we want to talk about celebrity sighting?
Well, I just want to say really quickly. Now, I don't think they just did their 250 today, but Latsier Brooks apparently is not in it.
I don't think he's in their top 250. He's top 100 for on three.
Yeah,
and I think he has a case for being even higher if you watch his tape. But Latsier Brooks is under the radar nationally, despite his commitment to Alabama. But this is a guy Alabama watched all this tape, and they're like, of all the wide receivers, we want Caleb Cunningham and Latsier Brooks.
Yeah,
and some services don't even rank Brooks, and part of it is just exposure. Not going to the right camps. He's not playing in the right state to get a ton of exposure in the recruiting industry in New Jersey. Some players do, but some players don't. But really, for receivers like Latsier, it's really about camps. And this is a kid that apparently just doesn't go out of his way to do things. Other kids kind of know the political ropes and know, hey, to get ranked, I got to do A, B, and C, and D. And Latsier just went to camp at Alabama and showed out for Saban, then showed out for DeBoer. And they're like, well, we want this guy. And then he's like, yeah, well, I'm done with going to camps then because I'm going where I want. And he just hasn't really played the recruiting game. On three's just knocked out by his high school tape, and you would be too if you watched it. I mean, that kid can ball.
Well, he still could be a 4-star in Rivals. I think they're going to release the rest of it tomorrow or whatever it is. But regardless, you had a celebrity sighting. You want to tell everybody it, and people will be very interested about this celebrity.
Well, it's just interesting because it's Tuscaloosa, right? It's not exactly, it's not L.A., but no, I just saw, stood around after practice. We do interviews, and Charlie Potter and I, and we taped the interviews with Coach Linguist. And who do we have today? Coach Linguist, Deontay Lawson, Jaheim Otis, and Freddie Roach. Seemed like LT Overton, which was kind of the big. LT had never been interviewed while he was at Alabama, so when they made LT available, he was bum rushed because media's never really got a chance to talk to him in Tuscaloosa. So all the other people in the room were probably like, hey, I'm right here. But everybody was just kind of going to LT for his quotes. And you can find that on BOL later today. So anyway, we went to lunch because I was starving, the wife and I. And while we were at lunch, shout out to Mediterranean Sandwich Shop there on the Strip, looked out the window and walking into Moe's, I saw Jalen Mbakwe, Red Morgan, and Ryan Williams. And it just sort of struck me that wow, Ryan probably is the second most popular player on the team behind Milroe. I mean, in terms of fan interest and social media. And, I know in terms of who I'm asked about on air, off air, it's almost always Ryan. And it was just kind of interesting to me. Like I told my wife I was eating, I'm like, I can't believe they're not at the football building eating for free. This is the NIL era, right? They can eat in the football building for free, and it's great. But they're like, to heck with that. We got our own money now. We're going to go eat at Moe's, and it doesn't matter what food. Moe's is good. Moe's.
No, I'm saying the football building is good food.
Oh, the football building's fantastic food. And Charlie, my colleague's got an article. It's got some work coming out soon. He did an interview with Alabama's new nutritionist, and she had some interesting things to say. So y'all check that out soon. But the Alabama football building, the food is great, but they all have their own NIL money now. They all can afford to eat wherever they want, and just reporting as we have to here on Locked On Ryan Williams. We can literally report where he ate today, because I think that's when you do a Ryan Williams podcast, you have to report where he ate. And today Ryan ate at Moe's with his buddy Bach and Red Morgan.
I'm so going to Moe's tomorrow.
Yeah, you got it.
Birmingham. I'm just going to let him
know. He's a trendsetter. Ryan, he's a trendsetter. So now
we don't have a
everybody eat at Moe's all week.
We have a guy named Mo, but we don't have a restaurant. Anyway, Jimmy, we're going to talk a little bit about some of those FanDuel odds I mentioned just a second ago here in this third segment. But eBay Motors, passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, style, baby, eBay Motors has you covered with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for, and with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time. Because with eBay Motors, you ain't burning rubber, you're burning cash. No, you are burning rubber. Wait a minute. Yeah, you are burning rubber, you're not burning cash. I almost messed that up, and I'm not editing it. Because eBay Motors, by the way, one of our loyal listeners named Michelle on Twitter, I don't know her last name, she tweeted at me and said, hey, my door handle broke, so I used eBay Motors because I listened to y'all. Michelle, thank you. Anyway, keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions, they apply. And eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. And I'm going to tell you again, go check out Locked On College Football. I'm telling you, I'm promoting him because I like him. He's a good dude, and he does a great job. Go check out Locked On College Football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, Jimmy, I pulled up the FanDuel odds here, and I'm beginning, call me nuts, right? Seriously.
Nuts. Soup to nuts.
So call me Soup to Nuts Robinson. But Jalen Milroe is plus 1,400 to win the Heisman Trophy. Now, look, I'm not telling you he's going to win it. I'm telling you I feel like those are pretty good odds.
Well, look, it's so obvious to me. Okay, so who wins the Heisman? Generally, who wins a quarterback? So, okay, if you're picking who should be a quarterback of a playoff team, right? Won't it be if I told you, Luke, the odds are you can pick what you're going to pick is the quarterback of a playoff team versus the field, what would you take? If I said, okay, who's going to win the Heisman? A quarterback of one of the 12 playoff teams?
Taking the quarterback, yeah.
Or the field?
Yeah.
I would take the quarterback of the 12 playoff teams, right? So then it's about predicting, okay, who's going to make the playoff and who are their quarterbacks? And Milroe is obviously Alabama's number 5 on AP and coaches poll. So Milroe's clearly a top 12 candidate, if not a top 10 candidate, along with who? Quinn Ewers from Texas and Carson Beck from Georgia, Dylan Gabriel from Oregon, Will Howard, I guess, from Ohio State, Riley Leonard from Notre Dame, Alex, Orgy from Michigan. Trying to think of who's Jackson Dart from Ole Miss, who, by the way, I think is a nice dark horse is Jackson Dart. But my point being, I think the list of quarterbacks of likely playoff teams is where you start. And next, what the next thing to where you start cutting that list to me, Luke, is, okay, who is a run-pass threat? Because those guys are more fun to watch. Those are the playmakers. Those are the machines. Those are the guys that put up the PlayStation-type numbers. That's why I think that even though Carson Beck and Quinn Ewers are likely to be drafted ahead of Milroe, I think Milroe is more likely to win the Heisman than those guys because he makes plays with his legs too. And he's more of a human highlight film than Beck and Ewers, who do everything great. That's why they're going to go in the first round. But I would take Milroe over those guys. But me, if I'm advising someone, okay, who's going to win the Heisman? Quarterback of playoff team, dual threat guy, and a guy who's going to get to play on some big stages in front of all the voters. And I'm just describing Jalen Milroe, right? So I think Luke is exactly right. Milroe's one of the best Heisman candidates if you're betting at this juncture, in my opinion. And that's not trying to be biased. I'm just trying to be objective. He's the highest returning vote getter on top of it all. So, yeah, Milroe. If I was picking a dark horse, I like Jackson Dart. And I think Riley Leonard is, to a degree, because Notre Dame's very likely in the playoff.
Well, here's the thing. If Notre Dame loses at A&M game 1, I think you can write Riley Leonard off.
I agree. And I tell you, here's one more, and I'm not a huge fan of this. He's got a chance to prove me wrong, but I tell you who's going to win a lot of games and probably put up numbers, and that's Dylan Gabriel. I think Dylan Gabriel is going to put up Bo Nix's numbers. Bo was in the Heisman race solidly a year ago, being the quarterback in this offense. If anything, Oregon's better. They're going to play in more high-profile games, being in the Big Ten. I think Dylan Gabriel is a pretty good Heisman bet. And I'm not a huge Dylan Gabriel fan. I think from an NFL sense, I'm not sure he's got enough arm talent to be a a top pick, but he's a very, very good college quarterback.
Yeah. It's funny. You were talking about one thing about quarterbacks, being on high profile teams. Who was the quarterback years ago, or that he was an all purpose player? Gordy something.
Gordy Lockbaum from Holy Cross.
Was that it? But what year was that?
Oh, that was a long time ago. I think we were practically in college then.
Yeah, like in the 80s or something.
Yeah, yeah. He played at Holy Cross, and
that's right.
He was an all-purpose quarterback, if I remember right.
That's one of the few dudes who, for whatever reason, people just fell in love with that guy. I think he was in the same class with Barry Sanders, though, so good luck.
Sure, he finished in the top 10 of the Heisman voting that year. It's just crazy because he's, an FCS school at Holy Cross. And, you can do that. A lot of people don't even realize that. Steve McNair, I think, got some Heisman consideration, even though he was at an FCS school also in the 90s. But, you can win the Heisman Trophy, even though you play at the next down division, FCS. It just hasn't happened because those guys don't normally play on a big stage. But interesting that, the top two teams in the FCS poll, Luke, are South Dakota and North Dakota State. And they both on opening weekend play huge games. North Dakota State at Colorado. A lot of people are going to watch that on that opening Thursday night. And South Dakota, the number 1 FCS team, is on the road at Oklahoma State. Can the best FCS teams pull off big upsets in week 1? That'll be one of the fun things. Hey, football's just right in front of us. We get to talk about all of it. We'll focus on Alabama, of course, but we're excited that college football is getting started now in about 11 days. Isn't that crazy? 12 days. No, it's 11 days from right now.
It's nuts. We're not locked on math. We're locked on Bama.
We are not locked on math. We're locked on Ryan Williams here every single day, reporting what Ryan had for lunch: a burrito at Moe's.
That's going to do it for today's podcast. We'll be back tomorrow with more. Until then, roll tide, everybody.
Roll tide.